Hi all, I fancy looking at another instructive game from Natalia Pogonina, and this time against Nana Dzagnidze. So this was in the European Individual Women's Championship of 2009. Natalia was white and she played e4, and her opponent played into the very sharp Sicilian dragon formation. So we have this dragon pawn structure, and it's the Sicilian dragon. Black will be fianchettoing this king's bishop. And white plays the sharpest continuation, where casting queenside will occur. So both sides will be casting on opposite sides of the board. So queen d2, now bishop d7. Now after the move h4, the plans are fairly straightforward for both sides. White will be trying to rip open the h file, often exchanging off the dark squared bishops to try and infiltrate the dark squares. But there are other plans, as this game demonstrates. That's the most stereotypical way of playing the position. Black, by contrast, will be using this semi-open c-file and often trying to sacrifice on c3 the exchange in exchange for a very strong, long-lasting either attack or endgame advantage. So black played now rook c8 and h5. So we see both sides using their rooks in classical format. So black on the semi-open c-file, white on the h-file. And now here, instead of this plan of knight e5, which I think is the most popular, to go to c4 to exploit this outpost square on that semi-open c-file, often getting white's light squared bishop, neutralizing therefore this diagonal as a method of attacking the black king. That's one of the classic plans that black has, but black actually varied with an immediate knight takes d4. And this changes the picture significantly for this other plan that white had at their disposal of bishop h6, because now something has to recapture on d4, and this would mean that this plan of bishop e3 to h6 is very long-winded now. So a different kind of plan is needed to be more effective here to meet the requirements of the position. After queen a5, white still castled queenside. So potentially, black still has the counterplan on c-file and aiming for rook c3s if white's not careful. So black immediately actually played b5. Now, did Natalia panic in this position, or did she find a creative solution? I believe she found a creative solution, making use of the bishop on d4. Forget this plan of the bishop, going to h6 to trying to trade off bishops. White simply first opened up the h-file, semi-open h-file pressure on h7, and now played g5. So she's exchanging off bishops like this. This is the much quicker route, but it does deprive the white queen of coming into h6 via this diagonal. However, I suppose the queen can come to h2, so it's not a big deal at the moment. Knight h5, so the dark square bishops get exchanged off anyway. So black is a bit weaker on the dark squares, and white still has this semi-open h-file pressure. So this is an extremely interesting dynamic position for both sides. One key issue for white remains, and I think that is solved in a very instructive manner, i.e. this pressure on c3. So white now combines attack and defence, I think, in a very creative, efficient manner by playing the move bishop h3, because not only exchanging off the light square bishops would mean more power to the punch for queen d5 potentially if there wasn't e6s, but it also means the rook, if it comes to h3 and white later plays f4, white will be defending the c3 square from the side, and this is what happens. Bishop h3, rook h3, and now we see black classically preparing to double up rooks and intensifying the pressure on this poor c3 knight, but now f4 is played. So not only the rook is in an attacking role on h7, but defensive as well. Rook fc8, and it looks as though black's pieces are fairly optimally placed for the attack on the queen side. King b1, and this means now that potentially there's knight d5s to be concerned about. Queen d2, knight e7, but at the moment there's king f7. But even so, black decided to bring the queen back. So queen d8, and now we see the move rook dh1. So both sides have doubled up their rooks on the respective targets. Black on c3, white on h7. Now the move knight h5 is played to interfere with this rook pressure, but it's only a temporary stopgap, because now white plays f5, and it's difficult now for black to do anything about this attack. But black does go for the c2 pawn now. After b4, knight d5, plays rook c2, so it doesn't mind getting rid of both rooks to get white's queen. But Natalia retains the queen on the board. She plays actually queen d3. And look at the queen. It's potentially menacing on this diagonal, if only this pawn wasn't in the way. Rook 8c5, now fg, hg, and now a beautiful little move, e5. So emphasising the weakness of g6. And it's starting to be very uncomfortable for black to defend this. Especially as the king can also be carnivorous if black's not careful. After rook d5, to play king c2. Queen d5, king c2. So now king g7. And the interesting move here, which dislocates the black defence, the move e6 is played. And look at how the communication has been cut off now. That white also has access now to this very powerful diagonal to the black king. So queen c8, and that's immediately used. Queen d4 check, and I think the position is now hopeless for black. After king h7, well, what else? Because if king f8, there's rook f1 check and queen h8 mating. Because this pawn is also forming part of a mating net to stop, the black king coming to d7. So not only it's, emphasised the diagonal, but white now has, the classic, ripping sacrifice. Rook takes h5, and it's all over. It's a forced mate. After g takes check, king g6, Natalia simply plays rook h6 check. And this is forcing mate, because if king takes g5, then we have queen f4, because the knight is supporting the queen, and that would be mate. So a beautiful crushing win, showing how to play against the dragon, showing how to combine attack and defence. When the rook was placed on h3 and white played f4, there was the attack on h7 still, that latent pressure, and also defending c3. Let's have a quick look at that again. So Sicilian dragon, with black not playing the ordinary plan of knight e5 to c4 in this game, but the alternative plan of taking on d4. But still with some of the same consequences of this dark squared bishop being taken off. So bishop takes d4, and now white still gets rid of black's dark squared bishop on the diagonal. And so that emphasizes the attack potential on c3 a little bit, but a further nice nifty idea is to use this rook to defend c3 now. So with the move f4, giving white a bit more time for the attack and a bit more defensive resource on c3. So king b1, now queen d8. And now both rooks lined up like black's rooks are lined up. So knight h5, but this was proven to be just a temporary defense, because after f5, it seems white, by offering the c2 pawn, not being too concerned, is not diverting attacking resources to defend c2 now, because she sees that this is a fairly harmless position, and in fact black would have to waste even more time retreating this rook out, because this king is potentially carnivorous. So rook 8c5, and now takes, and now this beautiful move e5. So it's a really difficult defensive task now for black. And after the move e6, this pawn is a real menace, not only for trapping the black's king, dislocating communication to the king side, but this diagonal is particularly lethal, and that's clearly demonstrated now after rook takes h5, forcing mate. So this was the final position. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. By the way, you can follow Natalia on Twitter. She is twitter.com/Pogonina. And she's also on YouTube. Thanks very much.